Hey y'all, it's Shaw Amir. I'm back again with another reading. This time I'm going to read from my Paranormal Menage romance murder mystery with BDSM elements. Yep, Second Chance Succubus. It's the first book in my Silver State Mysteries series. And, it's paranormal. So the characters are a succubus and two werewolves. And, well, I'll just read you the first chapter and you can see if you get hooked. So here we go. Drip, drip, drip. The soft patter of liquid against a hard surface echoed in the silent room. A muted glow from recessed lighting barely touched the growing pool on the floor below the hanging silhouette. The soft hum filtered through the quiet space as the air conditioning units clicked on, and the silent form swayed gently, twisting until the light illuminated the face. Eyes wide and glassy, horror marked the slack features stretched around a ball gag. The arms had been bound behind the back, pressing the torso forward against the bands of the confining cage in which the body hung. Wicked slash marks strafed the exposed portion of skin on the legs between the cage bands in jagged cuts. The genitals remained untouched and slack against the great crimson swath painting the inner thighs down to the ankles. The soft pattering continued, each scarlet drop from the heels increasing the spreading stain. Another body lay against the base of one concrete wall, the ribs rising and falling with life. Dressed in black leather, thigh-high boots with stiletto heels and a brocade corset, the woman rested face down like an abandoned rag doll. The tools of her trade lay strewn about the room as if someone had swept them off their perch in a toddler's tantrum. Paddles of different sizes sat scattered over a flogger and a metal chain with small rubber clamps on the ends. Several other ball gags decorated the floor as if the juggler had dropped his toys in haste. The cage holding the body slowly turned in the morbid light, and the subtle dripping continued with brutal repetition. Nick Wolf smelled her long before he saw her. The human woman wore enough perfume to make up the entire perfume counter at Macy's, and he held his breath, praying that to anyone listening that she'd pass his office on another errand. His hopes crashed and burned as a feminine silhouette paused before the clouded glass. Then the handle swept toward the floor, and the door opened. The woman looked to be in her early 40s, with a few silver strands in her mousy brown hair, gathered in a neat ponytail at the base of her neck. Her faded blue eyes darted around the room as she courteously closed the door behind her with a soft click. When she saw Nick, she grimaced and rubbed the gold cross at her throat as if to gather her courage. "May I help you?" "Are you Nick Wolf, private investigator?" Her voice held worry and fatigue. "Yes, ma'am." "Your ad on Google said you could find anyone in Las Vegas." He nodded again. "Yes, ma'am." She bit her bottom lip and settled herself gingerly on the chair across from his desk. He wished he'd thought to turn the ceiling fan off before she came in. Her eau de Macy's wafted in repeated swaths across his senses with each pass of the faux wooden blades. When she didn't say more, Nick leaned his elbows on his desk and tried to smile through the stench. "Why don't we start with your name? Why don't we start with whether or not you can find who I'm looking for?" The strength of her response surprised him, and he cracked a grin. "Yes, ma'am. Who are you looking for?" "My husband." Nick raised his eyebrows. "Okay. What is your husband's name?" "Richard Johnson." As he took a breath to say something, she added tersely, "Yes, I know it's a common name, but he was here with the Nebraska Tractor Consortium conference at the Desert Oasis Casino, and he should have been home 3 days ago. No one has seen or heard from him since Thursday morning." Nick's gaze rested on the little wooden desk calendar, 5 rotating blocks carved with the day, month, and date. Monday, February 10th. He glanced back at the determined woman. "That seems a bit quick for you to be here, Mrs. Johnson. It takes 24 hours to file a missing person." "Yes, and it has been 3 days, Mr. Wolf." Why didn't you go to the police first?" "I did. They told me I had to wait." She raised her chin in challenge. "I came to find my husband when he wouldn't answer my texts or calls. He never goes this long without contacting me. Something is wrong. I can only assume it's this cesspool of sin." She wrapped her hand around her gold cross and squeezed until her knuckles turned white. Nick kept his voice level. So you thought you should come here to look for him? I want to be here when he's found. What if he doesn't want to be found? Guys often came to Vegas to escape life at home. He's probably here for his mistress. Where was he when you last heard from Mr. Johnson? Nick pulled out his tablet and light pen to take notes. At his hotel. He said he was going out that night, but he'd be back in time to catch his flight out early the next morning. Nick heard genuine concern in her voice. He never made his flight. And he's staying at the Desert Oasis? Yes. Nick wrote notes directly into his tablet with his stylus. Did he have any friends or associate he saw regularly that might have been with him either at the conference or whenever he went out at night? He knew a lot of them. They were on his sales team. She frowned and rubbed her hands together. He was closest with Paul Hemmings, my brother. He was here at the conference with Richard. Have you heard from Mr. Hemmings since the end of the trip? Yes, my sister-in-law said he'd return home as scheduled. Did he say anything about your husband's whereabouts? No, they had different flights. Nick wondered if Mr. Johnson had a gambling habit and went off the grid to hide it from his wife. Did your husband gamble? No, never. She shook her head emphatically. He was never interested in that. He never visited any of the casinos here or at home. How often did he come here? Twice a year. This was his first of the year. It's their annual convention, and they always come here. She grimaced and glanced down her hands. He comes a second time to meet face-to-face with his Nevada clients. He's very hands-on. Might have a mistress or gambling problem. Check contacts in casinos, Nick wrote. What about a mistress? When Mrs. Johnson drew back like he'd slapped her, he added, I'm just trying to be thorough, ma'am. Is there a possibility he had another woman? No. Her lips compressed so tightly the skin around them turned white. Richard was happy, and we never had any sexual problems. Nick nodded, but her scent conveyed her doubt. Poor woman, the bastard probably was playing on the side if he kept coming back here twice a year. Okay, here's how this works. The price is $2,000 for time and expenses simply to locate and snap a few pictures. Nick pulled out a standard contract. If at such time as I find him you want more intensive surveillance, we'll renegotiate for costs. Does that sound fair? Mrs. Johnson heaved a sigh. Yes, Mr. Wolf. Good. Initial here and here and sign and date at the bottom. The scratch of the pen seemed loud in the silent room, but the woman's sense pulled back a little from fear and tension. She must think finding her husband is a done deal with the signature. That hadn't been his experience, but he wouldn't rush to judgment just yet. Thank you, Mrs. Johnson. Nick separated the copies for her to keep. How would you like to pay, cash or credit card? The woman grimaced, but fished out her wallet. I'd like this to be a cash transaction. Nick nodded. That was often the case in his business. Most folks didn't want a record of their visit. Would you like a receipt? No, the contract is sufficient. After Nick took the cash, he took down all the information she had on her husband's trip. Hotel, known associates, friends, favorite locations around Vegas. Richard Johnson seemed like a fairly ordinary guy, according to his wife. He held back a grimace. Most of the men he trailed hid everything they could from their wives. Well, Mrs. Johnson, I truly hope this $2,000 is a waste of your money. What do you mean by that, Mr. Wolf? I hope we find your husband doing nothing more than getting lost on a binge in some casino or stumbling drunk to his hotel instead of something more sinister. Her expression hardened. For his sake, I do too, Mr. Wolf. Ah, hell, maybe he did come here for relief from this woman. Mrs. Johnson retreated out his door, and Nick surveyed his notes, wondering where this story would go. Hopefully this guy just got a little lost and he'll be home soon. But something about the case made Nick's gut tighten and his nose twitch. Time to make some phone calls and start tracking the guy down. Goddess, I hope he's not in bed with his mistress. So, that's a little teaser of what you have to look forward to. There's more. We'll get his brother Chase's perspective, and of course, Aislin's. But in the meantime, I hope you get hooked. All right, thanks a lot. Talk to you later. Bye.